There's a man you can meet in the elevator, but don't turn around. I was walking with my teeth clenched, so tightly my jaw began to ache. My breath came in ragged bursts through my nose, and each step echoed in my chest with the dull roar of anger, like the rumble before a storm. My fingers in my pocket clutched a small safety pin, cold, smooth, with a blunt tip, but it was enough. I could hardly feel the cold in the entryway, even though the air was soaked with dampness and something metallic, as if the concrete walls remembered blood. Maybe they really did. When the door behind me creaked shut, the noise of the street disappeared, and I was wrapped in thick silence. The single ceiling bulb flickered. I knew the elevator worked. I had checked it in the morning. I had planned for everything. Slowly, as if the ritual had already begun, I approached the metal doors and pressed the button. They opened almost immediately with a familiar, painfully recognizable rattle. I stepped inside. The mirror still hung on the back wall, dull, scratched, old. When I looked into it, it seemed to refuse to reflect light fully, distorting the features. My face in it looked like someone else's, the shadows under my eyes deeper, the gaze darker, the skin paler, as if someone else was watching me from inside. I pressed the button for the top floor, the ninth. The panel gave a short beep. The elevator jerked and began to rise slowly, reluctantly, groaning. I knew what to do. I pulled the pin out of my pocket, held my breath, clenched my teeth, and pierced the pad of my thumb. A sharp flash of pain, and then it was gone, replaced by a pulse of adrenaline. A drop of blood appeared on the skin. One, then another, and another. I brought my finger to the mirror. 3 dots, bloody, a symmetrical triangle, top right then left and bottom, just as we were taught. The light flickered. Once, darkness for a second, then again longer, and then the light returned, but dim, unreal, as if the bulbs were no longer electric, but lunar. The elevator stopped, not on the ninth, not on a floor at all. I didn't see a number on the panel, just a stop. The metal doors opened, as if someone had pulled them from the inside, and he entered, tall, unnaturally tall. His head nearly touched the ceiling, but he stood completely still, not stooping in the slightest. He wore a dark cloak, far too long, as if sewn from black water or smoke. I couldn't see his face, it was in shadow, but I could feel his presence. His gaze. A chill ran across my skin, not like a draft, but like icy fingers slipping under my clothes. The air became heavy all at once, like someone had laid a wet sheet over my shoulders. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, it was the rule. First and most important, don't look. I stood there, staring at the mirror, now smeared with blood, now reflecting not my face, but something blurry behind me. Something huge. My breath caught. My knees began to tremble. I felt the fear crawl down my spine, a hot tremor turning into cold weakness. My tongue felt wooden, my lips glued together. But I had to. I hadn't come for nothing. I came with anger. I came with a name. With effort, fighting through the frozen terror, I opened my mouth. A rasp, the first sound, then the second, just a name. I forced it out with pain and hatred, pouring into it everything, the hurt, the rage, the humiliation, the years of simmering fury. Caroline. Silence. The light flickered again. I didn't dare move. I just stood there, like my legs were nailed to the floor. Only my heart pounded, like it wanted to break out of my chest. And then he vanished. Just like that, the cold vanished too. The heaviness in the air dissolved. I felt like I had been thrown onto the shore after being underwater too long. I inhaled, shaking, broken, but alive. The elevator started moving again, this time down, smoothly, as if nothing had happened. as if this was just a regular elevator. I looked at the mirror, at my face pale but alive. I felt the anger slip away, evaporate, as if I had exhaled it, and only emptiness remained. But beneath that emptiness was, no, not guilt, anticipation. Yes, it burned inside like hot wine. It warmed me. When the doors opened on the first floor again, I stepped out as if nothing had happened. My legs still trembled slightly. My hands shook, but inside I already felt different, calmer, triumphant. I looked around. Everything was the same as always: peeling walls, the damp smell, the dim bulb, the distant hum of the street behind the front door. But inside me, something had shifted. Not rage, I'd left that in the mirror. Not fear, it still trembled in my bones, but it had begun to retreat. This was a sense of justice, satisfaction, like the aftertaste of revenge you'd waited for too long, too fiercely, almost without believing it could really come. I passed through the empty lobby, pushed the door open, stepped outside. The evening air slapped my face. Somewhere in the distance, a car screeched to a stop. A dog barked. A television flickered in someone's window. The ordinary world, stupidly mundane, unaware that right here, so close, someone had passed through the mirror. I stopped and looked up at the darkening sky. Gray, indifferent, and in that indifference, I suddenly felt powerful. He heard me. Through steel and concrete, through blood and fear. He heard my name, and now she will pay. I didn't know how, or when, or how cruel it would be. Maybe not right away, maybe not directly, but the price would be paid. I felt it, like an icy stamp on the soul, like a shadow behind my back that would keep reminding me of itself at night. I didn't immediately remember where all of this came from. The knowledge, the certainty, the step-by-step sequence of actions that could not be broken. It all came back so naturally, as if I had simply picked up an old dusty doll from the floor, the kind I used to play with. But in truth, the roots went deeper, much deeper. It started in childhood. I was 11, and at the time I was friends with a girl named Lena. She lived in the neighboring building, just across the yard, and she had that strange, unnerving, but at the same time mesmerizing quality. She always seemed to know a bit more than she should. Some kids are like that, not because they read more books or secretly watched forbidden movies. They just know, as if someone whispered in their ear at night. Lena told me stories that made me unable to sleep. We'd bury ourselves under the blanket, pretending to laugh, but inside us posed a creeping anxiety, sharp as a splinter, and we couldn't stop listening. One summer day, when the air was thick, rotten, sticky, Lena told me she knew a way to make someone disappear. Not die, at least not right away. Just vanish from your life, be punished, become nothing, and she told me about it, about the elevator, about the black man, about the blood on the mirror. There's only one rule, she said, as we sat in her bathroom with a lit candle and a few pieces of candy. Our offerings for spirits, the main one, don't turn around, no matter what happens. If you turn, he'll take you. I nodded. I didn't fully believe it, but at the same time I knew I was already in, neck deep. Back then Lena and I hated a girl, Misty. She was the kind that hid behind a smile, but stabbed deeper than any direct blow. Parents adored her, teachers praised her, and the kids, well, the kids were just afraid. She was a predator. Always knew where to strike so that later you'd feel like it was your own fault. I don't even remember what exactly she'd done that made us hate her so much. Maybe she mocked my clothes, or snatched one of Lena's notes off the board. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she deserved it, we were sure. And of course, I turned out to be the braver one. Lena said so herself. If you do it, He'll listen to you. You're real. There's fire in your eyes. Now, I realize how strange that sounds for 11-year-olds. But back then her words pierced through me. I believed her. I felt like a witch, powerful, capable of shaping fate. That evening, when my parents went to the neighbors, I went out to the yard, circled around to the other building, the one with the old elevator and the mirror. Dead, worn out, with rusted buttons and a reflection like cloudy water. I stepped in, pressed the button for the 9th floor, and when the doors closed, I pulled a needle from my pocket. Just a plain thin needle from my mother's sewing box. Pricking my finger was terrifying. So terrifying I could barely breathe, but I did it. A small drop of blood glistened on my skin, and it seemed like the elevator froze. As if it were waiting, I touched the mirror and placed the first dot, then the second, then the third, a triangle. Just like the instructions, the light flickered, first, quickly, then a long, sticky flash, as if someone had switched reality off and back on. The elevator stopped. The doors creaked. I felt him. My whole body tensed. I froze. An icy wind hit my face, though there were no windows, of course. I heard someone enter, very tall, with heavy steps, as if the world bent beneath his feet. In the reflection I saw his outline, blurry like smoke or a wet stain. He stood directly behind me. I almost cried. My knees buckled, my palms sweat, my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat like a foreign object. I wanted to run, burst out, escape, but I couldn't. I knew if I ran, he'd take me. I stood and stared into the mirror, at my face, and at him behind me. He didn't move, just waited. And then I said the name, Misty. The word slipped from my lips, trembling like a string. It hit the air and shattered like glass, and in that same moment, everything vanished. The light returned, so did the sound. The elevator started moving again. He was gone. I nearly collapsed onto the floor. Tears, sweat, a numb face. It all mixed together, but beneath it, triumph. Horrible, sweet, forbidden triumph. I knew I had done it. Now I had to finish. The next morning I went back into that same elevator. The yard was still soaked in early chill. Gray light slowly trickled down the roofs, and the asphalt gleamed with the wet sheen of the night. Everything looked normal, but I walked like I was in a trance, as if moving inside a bubble where the sounds were muffled, the colors faded, and time slowed like in a dream that feels too real to be fiction. I stepped into the building. The elevator, as always, waited in silence, as if nothing had happened, as if it hadn't seen, hadn't heard, hadn't felt. Though I knew it had been part of the ritual, its metal skin, its steel throat, the place where we whispered names. I pressed the button. There was no fear inside me now, only a heavy emptiness, that state when you've already done something that can't be undone, and now you just keep going, because turning back is no longer possible. There is no way back. The doors closed with a screech. I didn't choose a floor. I just let the elevator take me wherever. I wasn't here for that. In my pocket was a small envelope with cut hair, my own, dark, heavy, still carrying the scent of the shampoo I used to love. Now it lay like dead weight. I held the envelope with trembling fingers, feeling my heartbeat pounding in my ears, though this time the fear was less. I knew what I was doing. I came to give. I stood in front of the mirror, looking into my reflection. Something had changed in it. I was no longer the girl who stood here yesterday. My hair was short now, awkwardly exposing my neck and ears. My cheekbones seemed sharper, my jaw more defined. I looked like someone else. Someone who knew what she was capable of. When the elevator stopped on the top floor, I tore open the envelope and pressed the cut strands to the mirror, as if offering a sacrifice, a trophy, a symbol. At that moment, the glass fogged slightly, like it had exhaled, and I felt it. He accepted. The offering was accepted. I told my mother I just wanted a change, that it was fashion, that I was growing up. She didn't ask too many questions, just frowned a little when she saw how serious I looked, but said nothing, and I stayed silent, because it was done. 2 days later, Misty broke her arm. I heard about it by chance, at school, during lunch. Someone said she had fallen down the stairs, something about the railing, and now she was in a cast and wouldn't be able to take part in the school play. I didn't believe at first. My heart dropped like a stone into a well, and I felt cold sweat break out along my spine. It happened. It worked. She had always been strong, agile, endlessly graceful, always on top. And now she'd slipped, just like that. I knew better. Everyone around me said, "Poor girl. These things happen. Could have happened to anyone." But I wasn't listening. I only heard my own pulse, my own voice speaking inside me, whispering, certain, exultant. He came, because I asked. And then, as if to balance out the triumph, as if the world demanded equilibrium, the worst thing happened. Lena disappeared. She wouldn't listen. She said she wanted it too, that she wasn't any less, that she had her own reasons, and he should hear them too. Her eyes burned with that strange light, like a fanatic's, like someone who had already crossed the point of no return. "You did it. Why can't I?" she said. "I want to get rid of her too." I didn't know who she meant. I didn't ask. I didn't care. I was just afraid. She went at night, said it was stronger that way, in the dark, that he answered faster then. She never came back. At first I thought she changed her mind, that she was hiding, that she wanted to scare me, teach me a lesson, like we sometimes did to each other, a test of loyalty, of friendship. But an hour passed, then another. Morning came, and she still wasn't back. Her parents raised the alarm, the police, neighbors, a dog tracking her scent, surveillance cameras in the building, nothing, empty. The last recording showed her entering the building. After that, nothing, no sound, no image, no trace. She just vanished, as if erased, as if she had never existed, and I knew. She turned around, or she did something wrong. She broke the rules, didn't give the offering, spoke the name too soon or too late. But most of all, I knew this, he took her. And that's when I swore to myself, never again. I buried it deep inside me like a dead animal that once bit you, and you're afraid if you dig it up, it'll come back to life. I stayed silent, withdrew from anything remotely supernatural, and the years passed. People forgot, only I didn't, because I knew the ritual isn't a game. It's not a bedtime story, not a childish dare, it's a deal. You give him a name, he gives you results, and he doesn't forget. You can forget him, pretend it never happened, live like a normal person, build a home, drink coffee, go shopping, laugh, fall in love. But he still waits, somewhere nearby, behind the glass, deep in the mirror, behind the reflection. I believed for a long time that it was all behind me, that it had been a sickness I survived in childhood, with fever, with nightmares, with sweat-soaked sheets, and then you grow up, and the world flattens out, becomes rational quiet. I tried to live like everyone else. Mornings with coffee, transit, work, evenings with shows, music, warm lights. Years went by, and almost without realizing it, I started to believe it had all been a game. Childhood nonsense. A flare-up on the backdrop of adolescent cruelty. That the ritual, the elevator, the mirror, the blood, all of it happened in my head. Part of a bad fairy tale that had been a little too convincing. But evil knows how to wait. It stays silent while you're sure it's gone. It sits in the mirror like a fogged up reflection, and just waits for you to call its name again. I didn't want to, I truly tried to resist, but sometimes life breaks you in such a precise way that you don't notice how you return to the darkest part of yourself, to the place you've already been, and you know there will be no way out without cost. Caroline cold, smart, impeccable manners, and a steel grip beneath a leather briefcase. At first, I tried not to pay attention to her. A new department, a new face, someone else's confidence. But then it all started happening too quickly. My position, the one I built for years, project after project, overtime, sleepless nights, went to her. First, it was a business trip I had been aiming for. Then, a promotion, just passed me by, no explanations. And then, him, my person, the one I thought I could finally breathe around, who understood me, who was there, gone to her. I didn't scream, didn't make a scene. I just shut down, lived on autopilot. At work, a smile. At home, silence. Inside, emptiness. As if everything inside me had been scooped out except the resentment. I watched her walk through the corridor, laugh at the coffee machine, talk to him on the phone like she'd always belonged to this world I had fought to break into. And one evening, I just stood in front of the mirror, in the elevator, just an ordinary one, no rituals, I was just going home. I looked into my reflection and didn't recognize myself. The face looked unfamiliar, or tired, the eyes dull, no fire, only pain, only weakness. And in that moment I remembered what it was like when I was strong. I remembered the elevator, the blood, the name, the shadow, the instant, deadly cold, and the voice, and something inside me snapped, because suddenly it became clear I had reached the edge where only one method remained, the last one, the old one, the reliable one. I didn't want to. I fought it. I held myself back to the last second, but the feeling of helplessness was heavier than the memory of fear. I did it again. Everything. Just like before, precisely, calmly, without hesitation. And when it was over, I stepped out of the elevator with numb fingers and trembling knees, as if my soul refused to believe that I had crossed that line again. Now all that was left was to wait, and I waited. A day, then another. Everything around me kept going, as if nothing had changed, but I knew. Inside, everything was already different. The density of the air, the silence in the apartment, the pauses between sounds, everything whispered he was near. He heard. I tried to act normal, work, routine, stare at the monitor without reading a single word, but every second, beneath the surface of routine, was waiting, a sharp, tight pull in my chest, like a string vibrating in tune with my breath, because somewhere out there, just beyond the edge of the normal, something had already begun. And then a message, just a regular notification, a gray rectangle flashing on my phone, but I already knew. I felt it before I even read it, as if my body knew before my mind did. A Caroline Cold, 29, died in a car accident. According to witnesses, the driver lost control. The impact hit the passenger side. She died in intensive care without regaining consciousness. I reread it once, then again, and then something inside me exploded. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even regret. It was joy, dark, heavy, deep, like honey that's long since gone sour. It surged over me like a wave, and I didn't even realize when I started to smile. Not that polite, office-ready smile, but a real one, alive with a spark of madness, like someone who had finally found justice in a cruel world. I looked at the screen like it was a window, and beyond it, a star had fallen, a one that had been shining in the wrong sky for too long. She was dead. Caroline, confident, impeccable, the one who played by the rules only to break them, the one who stole what was mine, my place, my man, even my confidence, the one who thought she could get away with it all. I leaned back in my chair, slowly, feeling how the tension that had built in my shoulders, in my jaw, in the base of my spine began to slip away like a heavy blanket finally being pulled off. My whole body filled with a strange, unfamiliar lightness. My breathing grew deeper, freer, and I suddenly realized I hadn't truly been breathing this whole time. I had been living in a state of stillness, like a trapped animal trying not to draw attention, and now I could finally inhale, fully, without fear, without restraint. He had done it. And now everything went quiet. Inside, where for so long it had been tight, dark, sharp, this was victory, not the kind you measure with a paycheck or applause. Not the kind you show off to someone, but personal, deep, raw. The kind that makes you flush with heat, then shiver because you know you're stronger than they thought. You survived, you got your revenge, and you were right. I closed my eyes and allowed myself joy, not hurried, not forbidden, not stolen from some fleeting circumstance, but real, deep, deserved. The joy of a winner, the joy of someone who had stayed silent for too long, who endured, who pieced herself back together, and finally got what she had waited for. I breathed slowly, evenly, with pleasure, as if the air itself had become denser, richer, sweeter, as if every breath was confirmation I did it. Caroline is dead, and now everything will change. I already saw the consequences unraveling, space clearing, as if someone had pulled a piece from the chessboard that had blocked my path for far too long. Ahead, opportunities opened up. Her office, now mine. I already knew how I would set it up. Move the desk closer to the window. Replace the ugly leather chair with a soft one, the kind you can really lean back in and think. I'd arrive earlier than the others, not to prove myself, but because now it was all mine, and I didn't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I knew that without her the project would sink, and I would be the one to lift it, to show that it had always been me holding it together. And when the management saw it, I wouldn't just be confirmed, I'd be promoted higher still. I already knew how I'd approach him again, the man who had left me far too easily. He would be confused. He already was. I could feel it. His emotions, his doubt, his guilt. I would unwind it all, slowly, patiently, carefully. I would bring him back. He would want to come back, because with me he was better, because I would let him feel needed again, as long as it suited me. I would be the one who chooses. I would no longer be the victim. I wouldn't let anyone go around me, humiliate me, take what was mine. Because now I had not just intelligence and will, I had him. If anyone ever stood in my way again, I knew what to do. I wasn't foolish. I wasn't impulsive. I wasn't the kind to scream. I would wait, observe, gather my rage like water in my palms until it was heavy enough, and at the right moment, I would release it quietly, calmly. No hysterics, just a name, one name, in the right place. I could even feel it. It had become easier now. As if the boundary between worlds had thinned, as if he was waiting. He was near, and I knew I didn't need to fight anymore. I just needed to know who. The sky outside had turned nearly black. Lights lit up in the windows across the way. Televisions glowed. People went on living their small lives, unaware that everything had changed. And I stood by the glass looking at the reflection of my face, calm, focused, strong, and I thought, this is only the beginning. Now I know how to eliminate obstacles. I left the office late that night, not because I was stuck there, but because I wanted to be the last one out. I wanted to feel that perfect silence, when the building feels like it's sleeping, when the walls no longer listen, and the city answers only to you. I wore a dark coat buttoned to the neck, and I felt collected, strong, polished like a stone long submerged in water, smoothed by time, by events, by pain. I walked easily, back straight, and there was no anxiety in my step, only purpose. only the feeling everything is under control. I pressed the button. The elevator arrived instantly, without delay, like an obedient beast. The metal doors opened with a soft creak, as if greeting me. I stepped inside. Everything was as usual, as always: the gleaming panel, the enormous mirror, polished by our cleaning lady's care, the slightly flickering light. I had pressed the button out of habit, without looking. The elevator shifted gently, almost approvingly, and began to move. Everything was perfect. The quiet hum of the cable, the steady drone, as if the heart of the old building was beating in rhythm with mine, and I stood in the middle of that silence, in its center, like in a temple built solely for me. I looked into my reflection and didn't recognize the woman who had stood there just recently. Her face had changed, sharper, more focused, colder, with a faint trace of satisfaction at the corners of her lips, and not the slightest hint of guilt or doubt. Her gaze was direct, clear, like a blade that had just struck true. Then the light flickered, once, sharply, but briefly. I barely noticed. Old building, old systems, nothing strange. I stayed put, didn't even flinch. I just kept looking. Everything was under control. Everything was mine. The light flickered again, this time slowly, longer. It didn't just blink, it lingered, as if someone holding the switch was deciding whether to leave me in the dark or play a bit longer. And then silence. The elevator stopped. I looked up at the display where the floor numbers usually blinked, but now it was blank. No number, no sign, just a black rectangle like a pupil, staring back at me. And suddenly I didn't just feel worry, I felt a mistake. Not panic, not fear, those came later. First came that subtle, squeezing feeling, the one you get when you realize you've forgotten something, like a switch flipping in your brain. The stove is still on, the iron's plugged in. You didn't take your keys. Something important, something irreversible. I tried to breathe and realized the air had grown colder, heavier, as if there were less of it, as if the elevator itself had decided that's enough. And then I heard its steps, slow, heavy, rhythmic like a pulse. But the doors hadn't opened, he hadn't come in, he was already there. He just appeared, like a shadow in the corner of your eye. He hadn't entered. He had grown out of the walls, out of the silence itself, filling the space so completely that even the air began to vibrate. The light flickered a third time, and I saw him in the reflection, my face pale and drawn, lips slightly parted, eyes too wide, and him behind me, tall and dark, but so heavy that the floor beneath my feet seemed to tremble, as if something massive had stirred under the building, awakened. I froze, my legs turned to rubber, and my knees began to shake, like when I was a child, the first time I saw him, only there had been a chance to run. Now there was none. I couldn't breathe. My chest wouldn't rise. My hands trembled. Cold shot down my spine like someone had slipped ice under my collar. But I still didn't understand why he was here. I had done everything. I hadn't summoned him again. I got what I wanted. This should have been it. And then the voice, it didn't sound out. It didn't come from lips. It was simply present, like a thought you never formed but that lived in you. Deep, slow, massive, like a stone slab falling, offering one word, but inside it terror. I hadn't just made a mistake. I had forgotten the final rule. I gave the name. I received the result. But I hadn't given a part of myself. Panic hit my stomach like a punch. I started frantically, blindly rummaging through my pockets, patting myself down, almost instinctively, like an animal with nowhere left to hide. Nails? Where were scissors? Cut them. Offer something, anything, an earring, a hair, a button. All wrong, all insufficient. I felt the horror swell inside me, not shrieking, not loud, but heavy, fatally cold, as if a frozen lake had begun to spread inside me, and I was sinking into it, and every second was the last, and there were no exits left. I tried to speak, say something. I didn't know. I forgot. I'll do it. But my mouth wouldn't move. My lips were dead. My jaw clenched with fear, and only a strangled, pathetic gasp escaped my throat. Time was up. He stood behind me, and I understood that it was over. There would be no escape, no mercy. Everything I could have said, done, offered, no longer mattered. Everything I could have forgotten, I had. And now he had come not to wait, but to take. I felt the ground beneath me go soft, my legs giving way, the trembling cutting deeper into my bones, into the very core of my being. It wasn't even fear anymore, but something older, more primal. What people feel when they realize the end is already inside the room and the door behind them is shut. And then I began to turn, slowly, pointlessly, but I couldn't help it. First the head, then the shoulders, everything resisted, but I kept turning, because you can't not look when you've already been chosen. I lifted my eyes to him, and the light went out. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like video and subscribe. It helps the darkness spread. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next nightmare. And remember, don't listen to the whispers in the dark.